Hey folks, welcome back to another video in the series that I'm doing on my twisty puzzle based game Permute. So my first two videos were just about Permute itself, a kind of quick introduction, and then a longer one if you wanted to see a full sample game played through. But now I wanted to talk about something I mentioned in those videos, which is that really Permute owes its existence to some innovations generated by other recent game designs in the abstract strategy game community. In particular, the scoring system comes from a game called Catchup, and the idea of fixing pieces in place after a move came from a game called Slyde. So I wanted to talk a bit about those games and show them off, but this is kind of a multi-purpose video because I also wanted to use this topic to introduce a really great piece of gaming software, free software called II, which you can see the homepage in front of you here. II is a piece of general game playing software that was designed and created by Stephen Tavener, who is also a talented game designer in his own right with many cool games to his name. And II allows you to play a huge range of abstract strategy games against a variety of different types of AI opponents. And you can also analyze the games in great depth. So for games like these where there's no randomness and where there's a lot of depth and intricacy to them, it's really helpful to have something like II so you can analyze and understand games in more detail, learn about what might be good opening moves or how to deal with endgame situations. And the AI analysis of this kind of software will really give you a jump forward in learning how to do some of that stuff. So if you're interested in these kind of games at all, it's an easy recommendation. You just need to make sure before you download it that you install a recent release of Java, the Java JDK version 11 or later. Once you get that on your machine, just click on the big green download button and away you go. So when you open II, it looks like this. And I'll just show you the game list so you can see what we're dealing with here. There's an absolutely huge range of games in II. Well over 100, I think well over 150 probably by now. It's got entire families of games like the drafts family. So this is checkers, Canadian checkers, international drafts, all sorts of stuff. We've got Go and various Go variants. We've got various games in the chess family, chess Knight 60, grand chess, all sorts of good stuff in there. Then we have the very cool modern abstract games designed frequently on the Board Game Geek abstract game community. Every year they have a contest called the Combinatorial Game of the Year, and every single game that's been put forward for those awards is implemented here in II as well. So that's dozens of games just amongst these folders, and a lot of these games are really fascinating. So there's just a huge amount of variety here. I mean, if you're interested in these types of games at all, if you've ever picked up a game of chess and enjoyed yourself, then just I would recommend digging through this game list and just seeing what you find. I can guarantee you'll find other games that will interest you as well. You can see there's a folder here for Catchup. Catchup has been through a few iterations with slight changes to the rules, but I'll show you the most recent one. So when you load up a game, typically you'll just get a blank board like this, and you'll have the option to modify some game parameters. A lot of these games are scalable, so you can do things like change the board size. And in fact, I'll do that now. Catchup, for beginners, you often play on this 5x5 hexagonal board, but as you get more experience, I find it's really rewarding to play on size 7 boards or higher. So it's a lot more space, as you can see. The board has expanded quite a bit, but that means that you have to really pay more attention to strategy in a bigger board. You have to think carefully about how you place your stones and build territory, and the opening phase is a bit longer. The middle game is a bit more extended, a bit more time for fighting with your opponent. So I think Catchup really shines on size 7 and above. But what Catchup is all about, I mean, Catchup is, of course, where the scoring system for Permute originated, which is this cascading group scoring mechanism where players are competing to form the largest connected group of their pieces on the board. But if their largest groups are the same size, then you cascade down and look at the second largest groups, and the largest of those two will take the win. Then if that's still tied, you can go to the third, then the fourth, and so on. So that mechanism is really genius because A, it ensures that, at least in the case of Catchup, there won't be any draws because you have an odd number of spaces on the board. and the game stops when the board is full. So that means somebody will have more pieces somewhere than somebody, and so you're guaranteed a winner at some level in that cascading mechanism. But it also means that it enforces strategic thinking in the players, because you can't just rely on having the largest group to carry you through. You need to think about your secondary and tertiary groups as well to make sure that you have a backup in case your opponent catches up. The other aspect of Catchup that was really ingenious on top of the scoring mechanism was that it has a kind of negative feedback mechanism. If you've ever played something like Mario Kart, you know, where you start to beat the computer really badly, the computer will give itself a burst of speed to catch up and make it a fight again. And there's something similar happening in this game. So if you manage to catch up to your opponent's largest group score on your turn or exceed it, then your opponent, instead of placing 2 stones per turn, as they would do in a normal turn of catch-up, they get to place 3. And so that's it. That's all you need to know how to play catch-up. The first player starts by placing 1 stone on the board, as I've done here. After that, every player places 2 stones per turn. So as you can see now, I've got the AI playing itself here just to show you how the game looks like. And then if somebody raises the highest score, makes the biggest group, then their opponent gets 3 placements on their next turn. And at the end of the game, you use the catch-up group scoring mechanism to determine who built the largest group and determine the winner. So we can see here that in the beginning phase of the game, you may have noticed that both players were placing their stones a bit spaced apart. They weren't connecting right away. That was to kind of sketch out some territory where they can potentially try and grow their groups through the board. And the reason for that as well is that once you start connecting things, your opponent will get extra placements because you'll have raised the maximum group score that's currently on the board, so they'll be able to place 3 stones instead of 2. And here we've got white tried to break through in the center here and build a large framework of pieces in the center, but black managed to cut that off and actually has completely severed white's pieces on the bottom half of the board from the top. So that seems quite good for black. Black actually has a 3-stone lead at the moment, but it remains to be seen whether they can hold that through the end of the game. There's still quite a few spaces left. White is going to try to make the most out of its space on the bottom here, keep extending this group, but black still having a slight lead. I wonder if white will be able to make a dent. Black's lead is down to 2 now, and now they're tied. So white is fighting back for sure, and black is now in desperation trying to reduce white's room for growth on the bottom here, but that also means that black isn't able to extend their own groups, and actually black's biggest group is completely hemmed in. So I think white may be able to take this if they're able to keep black's invasions at bay here. Yeah, white now in the lead. Black is, I think, in dire straits. Down only by 3, but I'm not sure there's a way to come back at this point. And we're almost at the end. Last placements, and yep, white wins. Wow, so that was quite a back and forth battle, actually, a good one. But you can see just from that very quick play by the AI, there's a lot of interesting things that happen in a typical game in Catchup. It's very easy to pick up. You just need to know that you place 2 stones per turn. If you catch up to your opponent's score, they get an extra placement on their next turn, and count the biggest groups at the end. That's it. But through that simple framework, you end up with this intricate battle of connection and disconnection. And here, black played very cleverly in the beginning and managed to completely stymie white's attempts to break through across the center of the board, but white fought back and actually managed to contain black's subsequent expansion. So black's group in the center here had nowhere to go. White just sort of squeezed in from all sides, and that was just enough room left then for white to come back and take the victory by 4 stones. So really interesting game, actually, from the computer. That was quite a good one. And in fact, yeah, I think that gives a pretty good example of what a game of catch-up feels like. It's really back and forth thanks to the rubber band AI mechanism, if you like, the extra placements you get for your opponent catching up. And yeah, there's intricate tactics from moment to moment, as well as intricate and interesting strategies across the whole board. So I highly recommend this game. Nick Bentley is a pretty prolific inventor of games, and has a pretty high hit rate. A lot of people seem to like his stuff. But for me, Catchup is the best one for sure, and I think it's the most accessible as well. But it is very, very deep, so definitely worth checking out. Now, as I mentioned, the catch-up mechanism was pretty influential, and the other game that benefited my efforts to design Permute was Slyde, and Slyde also uses the catch-up scoring mechanism, just like Permute does. Let's see, so we'll play on the standard 12 by 12 board. So as you can see, Slyde, you also start with black and white's pieces all mixed up in a checkerboard formation, but the difference in Slyde is that when you make a move, you're actually swapping two pieces, right? So if I'm white, I'll grab one of my white pieces and I'll swap it with a horizontally or vertically adjacent black piece. But the innovation that Slyde brought to the table, that was the last bit that I needed to make Permute work, was the idea of fixing things in place. So once you swap two pieces in Slyde, the piece that you moved is then permanently fixed in place after that, can't be moved again. And that gives each move a sense of permanence. So your opponent's piece can still swap potentially, but your piece is now fixed. And so every move becomes a trade-off of taking an immediate advantage from that move, hopefully building up a bigger group on the board, but also you're losing mobility. And the board is now getting closer to an end game, inevitably, with every move. And I realized when playing Slyde that actually this is what I needed for Permute. My struggle with Permute was that the twisting mechanism was great. I really enjoyed it. It was fun. The catch-up scoring mechanism was perfect for what I wanted to do with it. It encouraged players to think about the whole board, build territory, and be organized about it. But I needed the game to terminate. And the problem with starting with a full board and twisting things was that theoretically you could just twist things forever. There's no reason to stop. You could just keep disrupting your opponent's groups forever and never get anywhere. So I needed moves to matter and to permanently change the board state. And I realized that then I could use Slyde's idea in my game, and so players would twist, essentially shifting four pieces at a time, but just fixing one of them in place. So that meant that your groups were still constantly in danger, right? You were only fixing one out of three pieces in place, and the other ones could still be disrupted. So you'd have to pay attention to the after effects of your moves, what pieces you were going to bandage, and how you could use that to effectively prevent your opponent from disrupting the territory you were trying to build. But it also means that over time, the board becomes constricted, and the game therefore has to end. So I give huge credit to Slyde for that thought coming to me. Without having played this game, I wouldn't have been able maybe to find that mechanism on my own. And so that really, once I put that in place with the twisting mechanism, the game felt complete at that point. And I played a bunch of test games, got a friend of mine to play with me and test it out as well. And I found that really, I think at that point, the game was ready to release to the world. So enough talking. What I'll do is I've got the computer ready to go here. So I'll show you a little sample game of Slyde here between the AI. So here you can see that II represents the pawns fixing in place with this gray circle. So that indicates that that move, that particular piece has been swapped and cannot be moved anymore. So you can see quite quickly we start to have areas of the board that are kind of already sketched out. Territories are beginning to take shape. And what do we got here? So black has a decent lead, but white is quickly fighting back. And it's again pretty tight, similar to our catch-up game that we saw a minute ago. White has got pretty good progress here for a moment along the right, but then got disrupted again by black. So this is what I find really interesting and challenging about Slyde, actually, is that moment-to-moment tactics are pretty understandable. You can quickly learn to see moves where your groups might be in danger, or you can endanger your opponent's groups. But the long-term strategy is a real challenge to uncover, and I think the game really has a longevity to it. I think there'll be a lot of interesting strategic intricacies and methods that'll come out as people become stronger at the game. The standard version is played on this 12 by 12 board, but I think that the creator reckons the 16 by 16 board might be better for serious play. That allows for more time for territorial battles to develop. So, oh, there we go. Black wins just by a scant one stone in that case. Um, but yeah, it's a great game. It does it has a lot of similarities to Catchup and to Permute, but each of these three games has a very distinct identity. Slyde, you get these constant back and forth battles over these long stretches of groups sort of winging their way across the board. In Catchup, you have this really dynamic, fast-paced field due to the 2 or 3 placements per turn. And in Permute, you have the interesting confusion that results from twisting a bunch of the board on every move, and the feeling that your groups are constantly in danger of being ripped apart by a well-placed twist by the opponent. So I'm really, really pleased that my game is now on Mind Sports next to Slyde and Catchup. These are two games I think are really great examples of the innovation that's coming out of abstract strategy games at the moment. They're both really well worth your time. So I highly recommend, if you're interested in these type of games at all, to download II and explore the games in detail that way. And also to go on Mind Sports or on II's online client and play against some humans, just to give it a shot. While we're here, I thought it'd be useful to show you a little bit of the many features that II has for analyzing games. So you have an analysis menu here where there's tons of different stats you can generate for any given game. You can look at statistics about the game's complexity in mathematical terms, how many moves are available on any given turn. You can look for the shortest possible game. You can analyze potential opening moves. You can generate tactical puzzles. Really tons of amazing features that can help you understand the game better. And in fact, what I'll do is one of the things I've done quite a bit for Stephen is I got really fascinated by these functions in AI for analyzing games, and it has a function where you can generate a full game report where it basically does all of this analysis all in one go and generates an HTML file that you can display on the web with tons of interesting graphs and images and information about the game. So I generated a whole bunch of those for Stephen, which are now on this II reports page on the website. You can see there's a long list of stuff that's been analyzed. I haven't done many recently, but for a while there I was doing quite a few. And actually there is one for Slyde on here, so I'll show you what that looks like. So you can see the full report, and Mike Zapawa, by the way, is the creator of Slyde. Then you can see, there's some background info about the game, the rules, the stats on Board Game Geek, people's ratings and comments, and then we get into some pretty intense numericals here. So we have different measures of game complexity, some stats about the AI's search methods, the win percentage for the two players, black and white, investigation of different levels of play. So as you increase the strength of the AI, do you see a clear advancement in their ability to beat lower ranked opponents with less thinking time? Classifications of moves that are available in different positions, coverage of the board during a typical game, game length, changes in material, just so much stuff. So if you're a game designer or just interested in games in general, this stuff can really be fascinating. I got really into playing around with this. And one thing that I really love is the ability to generate tactical puzzles. So it doesn't work great for every game. It really depends on how well the AI is able to solve positions on the game board. If the game has really large amounts of available moves, it can be difficult for AI to generate puzzles because it can't be sure that a given position doesn't have many possible good moves and solutions. So, but Slyde is a great one for generating puzzles. There's a lot of options on any given turn, and it feels really complicated to the human player, but for the AI, it can really calculate this kind of game pretty well. So when you run a report in II or you use the puzzle generation function, it will produce an image of a position, and it'll tell you, like here, white to win in 17 moves. So you know that you need to find a 17-move solution where white will win the game against any possible black replies. And then I will find the solution and generate a lovely animated GIF, which will show you how that solution goes. So here we can see all the moves that white needs to make, and the best possible replies from black, but black cannot be saved. Ultimately, white will win after 17 moves. Oh, and there we go. So that final move from white chopped off these two groups. That must have been the key moment to really secure the victory. Um, and yeah, you can see that I was able to find a ton of puzzles for Slyde, all different lengths, some short 6 or 7 moves, some longer 9, 10, 12. So it's just an amazing piece of software to have so much functionality dedicated to playing and understanding games in great depth. So if you're a nerd for games like me, you really can't go wrong with downloading II. So I do highly recommend you take a look. And while you're there, have a look through. If you go to the categories menu, you can look by author. And I recommend doing this, picking out some random games from some of these creators. Christian Freeling, of course, the creator of Mind Sports, has made many classic games, so you could easily start with some of his stuff. I'd recommend Havana, Grand Chess, Star Web in particular, and Simple is my favorite game from him. An amazing, clever territory game where you move many stones onto the board every turn, but the way you do it is really, really clever. It keeps the game comprehensible. It's just amazing. You should play Simple. Craig Duncan has some good games. Side Stitch is a really good game. Iris is a really good one. Both are games of connection and group scoring. Dietrich Stein, Tintas is an amazing game from him, which is also very colorful. In fact, I'll show you what that looks like. Beautiful. Look at that. This is an interesting game where the players have a shared piece, just one piece that they move around back and forth in turn, and you try to collect sufficient numbers of pieces of each color. It's a great little game. What else do we have here? So Luis here has created a number of really seminal games. IU is a great game of unification. You try to bring all your pieces together into one blob and prevent your opponent from doing the same. We have as well, I don't know how you pronounce these, but Yod is my preferred one. Zod and Yod are both related. Zod is on a square board, Yod is on a hex board. And these are games where you have to build the largest group, like in Catchup, Slyde, or Permute. But there's a restriction where the number of groups on the board at the end of every turn must be odd. So that, when you really think about what that restriction means when you're playing the game, it creates some really fascinating tactics. It's a really interesting idea. So I definitely recommend that as well. And IU, of course. Chiral Corridor is a cool connection game. Tixel is a very good game as well, which is more chess-like, actually shogi-like, in that you drop pieces onto the board. I mean, there's just so much stuff to try here. Of course, you have Catchup from Nick Bentley, which I highly recommend. Bug is a very unique game from him, which I don't understand at all, but it's interesting to play. Odd is a beautiful and elegant, simple game of building groups from him that I highly recommend. Blooms is kind of a 4-color version of Go, which is pretty cool. Nestor Games has a bunch of stuff implemented here in II. Morelli is an interesting game of capturing a throne in the center of the board. And then II creator Stephen Tavener's games are really cool and have a ton of personality, actually. He's quite good for making games that have a bit of playfulness about them. Not quite so serious as some of the other abstract games with their hex boards and black and white pieces. Some people like that, some people don't, but I think it's great to have both available. In particular, he made a game that made me very, very jealous recently. This game is called Slug, which stands for Slitherlink-like game. So it's a game based on the Slitherlink logic puzzles. Have you ever seen those before? I've been trying to create a game based on that for a long time, and he finally came up with one, and it's pretty fun. It's pretty cool. So I was a little bit jealous that he got there well before any of the rest of us could. But yeah, so you can also check out plenty of historical abstract games, of course, Go, chess, checkers, etc. But I would toot my own horn here for a second and suggest you check out the variations of Nefertafel, which is the 1,000-year-old game of the Vikings, an asymmetrical game of one side is trying to get the king to the outside edge of the board to freedom, while the attackers are trying to kill the king. So the two sides have different goals. There's many, many variations of Nefertafel, many of them created in the modern era, and I helped Stephen to create all the opening positions for these variations of the game. We basically covered, I think, all the variants that are playable online today, and it was a bit of a project. I also made the graphics, which I think are quite adorable, so I'm happy with that. So do take a look at the TOEFL games as well. If you go in the Choose Game menu, there is a TOEFL family folder, and you can see different variations. I think Sea Battle, which has a lot of different possible opening positions and board sizes, is probably the most elegant and balanced of all the TOEFL games. So maybe start there. But also, it's fun to play the really monstrous big ones like Alea Evangelii. I don't know if that's how you say it, but something like that. So anyway, I'm getting off track here, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a taste and some recommendations for other games to check out when you download II as well. But yeah, I hope you'll take a look, spend some time with Catchup and Slyde in particular, and then explore a bit more of the games and see what you find. I'm sure there's so many games in here that you'll bound to find something that tickles your fancy, no matter what your taste. So check it out. If you find something interesting, or you want to challenge me to a game of something, just let me know in the comments. If you would be interested to see some more about any of the games in II, or some more content about Permute or its relatives, just let me know. I'll probably do some anyway, whether people ask me to or not, because this is my other main hobby besides Twisty Puzzles these days. But yeah, I will get back to more Twisty Puzzle related content in the next few weeks. And until then, stay safe, and I'll see you again soon.